So welcome to the Stathead Basketball webinar. My name is Jonah. I'm the product marketing manager for Stathead. Stathead is the sort of advanced set of research tools that we at Basketball Reference and Baseball Reference and Pro Football Reference have put together to let you go a little deeper into the numbers. So you're probably very familiar with the, what LeBron's basketball reference page looks like, or what the Celtics basketball reference page looks like, and the kind of stuff you can look up in there. But that's just scratching the surface of what you can do, of kind of what is in our database. And so we built Stathead so you can answer more complicated questions, do kind of more interesting and advanced research, and then share the results you find with your friends, or use them in your fantasy league, or use them to write a comment on the internet about why someone is wrong. All sorts of different stuff. So what I'm going to do is just go through some of the tools, kind of show you as they relate to kind of some of the big questions I have going into this playoffs. Kind of what you could use these tools to do. And then as I'm going, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. You can drop them in the chat. You can drop them in the Q&A box, whatever works for you. And we'll keep track of those. And then at the end, I'll make sure to leave plenty of time to answer your questions and stuff like that. So with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us started by logging on to Stathead and getting that up. Let's see here. There we go. Share screen. All right. So this should be the, you should be seeing the Stathead Basketball homepage right now. If you're not, someone tell me in the chat right now. This is basically our front page where you go to find a number of our different tools. If you are a Stathead user already, you may be familiar with some of these, but I would guess that even super advanced users probably have some that they've never gone into, or some that they're less familiar with. So I'm going to start with some of the big ones, the really popular ones that relate to the playoffs, and then get into some of the lesser known ones that are really where I think the power of Stathead kind of shows through, and where if you're breaking down, trying to handicap a playoff series, trying to figure out what crazy thing your coach is doing that you're going to get upset about, stuff like that, you can do that in some of these more advanced tools. But for starters, I'm just going to head into the Season Finder. The Season Finder is a tool for looking at seasons. There's a player one and a team one. Right now I'm in the player one. And the way this works, and the way that pretty much all the Stathead tools work, is you'll see along the left side of my screen this kind of big list of filters and buttons, and these are the things that you can search for. So you use this to kind of build the framework of your question. So one important thing to look at on here is going to be this toggle, regular season or playoffs. You can search playoff stats the same way you could search regular season stats. So let's say that I want to see everyone who's averaged 25 points per game in the playoffs. I'd go to the statistical filters like I just did. I'd scroll through it until I get to points per game, and then type in 25. I've already switched to playoffs. So I'll hit this big get results button, and boom. This is a list of every player who's done it. But right now, by default, it's sorted by who had the most win shares in that playoff run. That may or may not be useful to me. Maybe I want to see who had the most assists per game while averaging 25 points per game. I would change the sort to assist. There we go. We can see 89 John Stockton, 90 Magic, 65 Oscar, kind of up here, averaging 12 assists per game, while also hitting that 25 point per game threshold. So that's how you use kind of this sidebar, but you also don't want to miss this top bar. So up here, there's search options. Right now I'm searching for for single seasons, so just 1 year, but I could do combined seasons. So right now it would search players who average 25 points per game in the playoffs for their career. I could also do a range of years. So I could just say who's done it since 2017, 2018. and run that search. And then here we go. Another list of the players who average 25 points per game in the playoffs in just those years. And then the last option for now, little teaser, is the find players with most seasons matching criteria search. And if you do that, it'll show you the players who had the most single seasons matching the criteria we've set up. So who had the most 25 point per game playoff runs since 2018? It was Giannis. He's done it 4 times, followed by Durant, Harden, and Kawhi. So this is just kind of scratching the surface of what you can do in this tool. In addition to stats, and we have advanced stats like PER, true shooting, BPM. I know that's a topic of hot conversation right now with the MVP race. You can get all of that in the statistical filters, but you can also get stuff like height and the college that they went to, whether they shoot left or right-handed, their age in the biographical filters. You can even get like whether they were an all-star, a Hall of Famer, whether they actually won MVP or made a defensive player, an all-defense team. So you can really start combining and mixing and matching these to answer some really narrow questions or some really broad questions. But either way, it's a very powerful tool, and it's about to get more powerful because I'm going to give you, just between us, this is top secret basketball reference information within the company. I could get in trouble for sharing this, but in a few days from now, we're going to unveil a huge update to this tool. We're going to double the search types. So in addition to these 3, there will be 3 more. We're also going to merge it together with our WNBA player season finder. So all of the stats from both the NBA, the ABA, and the WNBA will all be in here. And with that, there will be a number of new searches that you can do for the WNBA. A lot of these filters, like the awards and the colleges and stuff like that, will be there. So that's a very exciting update that's coming soon. All right, so that is the season finder. And again, stay tuned because that's going to get even better in just a few days with new search types and the WNBA stats. But obviously in the playoffs, looking at kind of full playoff stats is interesting, but a lot of the time during the playoffs, I find myself drifting away from the season finder and more into the game finder, because it's really like, I'll be watching, it's game by game. You'll be watching someone having a crazy game. You'll wonder, man, when's the last time they did this? Or like, can they really do that again? Or stuff like that. So the season finder is a great tool for that. Or the game finder, apologies. This looks at every box score in our database. So again, you can toggle from regular season to playoffs. This one also has a combined option, so you can do both. And when you click on the playoffs option, like see kind of, it has the same setup as the season finder with these like statistical filters and player filters. There's like game filters, because on a game level, you can look up stuff like the location, whether there was overtime. There are filters for triple doubles and stuff like that. But when you click to playoffs, you'll see kind of some of these options change around. So now you can search by playoff rounds. You can just look up finals games. You can just look up first round games. You can just look up the Eastern Conference Finals if for some reason you wanted to do that. And you can also narrow it down to the game within the playoff series. So obviously a really popular one to look up is Game 7s. So if you want to see, I don't know, who had the most. So we'll start again with, we'll look at points. We can look at who had 30 points in any Game 7. And I'll sort it by date just so we get most recent to least recent. So there we go. These are all of the 30-point Game 7 scorers. But what if I am, what if I'm saying I don't want to see these guys who lost? I'm not impressed with that. I want to see people who played winning basketball and scored 30 points. Then you go down to the game filter and you click game result and win. And there you go. So these are the people who had 30 points in a Game 7 and won the game. But this is just like a list of players. What if I want to know who did that the most times? I would go to find players with the most games matching the criteria, click get results. And there we go. It turns out LeBron has done that the most times. He has done it 5 times. followed by Larry Bird with 4, Durant and Dirk with 3. So again, the real power of a tool like this comes from mixing and matching, combining filters, adding them, subtracting them. And you can really put together some nifty searches. I could have added 10 assists if I wanted to. I could have added blocks or steals. There are advanced stats in here too. We've got game score and box plus minus. So you can really go crazy in the game finder. So those are kind of 2 of the bigger tools. But if you're trying to like, oh, and then one other cool thing that kind of works the same way that I'll just show briefly is the quarter finder. This lets you search for single quarters or halves. So if you watch like someone go off in the first half, you could go to this toggle, change it to halves, go to the first half, change it to playoffs, obviously, and then just run that same kind of search. And you can see, again, just a list of players who went off in one half, like sure, we'll do 20-point playoff halves and see what we get. So there's a big list. So it's sorted by most points. So you can see Durant has this 38-point half, but we could also see who has the most 20-point playoff halves in their career with the same toggle basically as last time, find most periods by a player in combined seasons or careers, matching criteria. Again, it's LeBron with 48. One key distinction to keep in mind, this quarter finder and a lot of the tools I'm going to go into later use play-by-play data. Play-by-play data is a lot less complete than box score data. So this only goes back to 1997 for the playoffs. The 1997 playoffs are the first year that we have playoff data for every single play that happened, not just every single game. The game finder, the playoffs and regular season stats, they go all the way back to the beginning of the NBA in 46, 47. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're using these. So those are cool, but I kind of want to move into now the stuff that I like to use this for, which is more like before the game, when I'm thinking about who do I think is going to win the game, or how can my team win the game, or what am I going to be watching for tonight? There's a few different tools for that. So one fun one that I'll start with is the head-to-head finder. This lets you type in the names of any 2 players, and you can see every head-to-head matchup they played. So, for example, the Celtics are taking on the Nets in the first round, probably the series I'm most excited for. So let's say I want to see every time Jason Tatum has played Kevin Durant. I can pull that up on here, and I can see their win-loss record, their average stats when they're going head-to-head. And I can see that for both the regular season and the playoffs. And then I can see just a list of how they did in every single game. So you can see that of the 2, Tatum actually has the single highest scoring game when he dropped 54 back last month in that really exciting Celtics Nets game from earlier this year. And I could also go down here and look at the playoffs and see, well, the only time they really played was last year, and the Celtics got kind of waxed in that series. So you can just kind of look through these stats and kind of see, but Tatum scored 50 in that game too. So he put up some very impressive numbers. So you can kind of look at this and kind of break it down and see, well, it looks like Tatum is gonna get his to some extent in this series, but so will Durant. So that's just kind of a fun starting point, especially I don't know, if we get deeper, if we get like a Chris Paul, Steph Curry matchup, something where those guys have been playing against each other for a number of years, you can really get some really good kind of in-depth, analysis of like how this head-to-head matchup has worked. They don't have to be at the same position either, obviously, although I like to look at like guys who are covering each other in the game, but it could be any player you want, like you could look at Jokic and Curry if you wanted. Just type them into the box. So that's the head-to-head finder. Now I'm going to move over to this section, which is the advanced play-by-play tools. So like I said, all of these tools use our play-by-play data. So they go back to the 1997 playoffs, or if you're looking at regular season, it's the 96-97 season. And they have a really cool large number of questions that you can answer in here. The first thing I'm going to start with is the plus minus finder. This looks through the play-by-play data and calculates plus minus, which like kind of basically, as you probably know, that's the team's scoring margin when the player was on the floor. So let me just, as I explain it, I'll just pull up this season's for us to start with. So this is just the raw scoring margin of every player in individual games when that player was on the floor. So we can see here, these were kind of the biggest like blowouts when a single player was playing in this season. But you'll also see that like it's not just showing that you can see kind of the difference in field goal percentage, field goal attempts. You can also, if you go up to here, you'll see there's other options. So you can see the difference in rebounding percentage when a certain player is on the floor. You can see the difference. You can see just what either that player's team did, their stats, their rebounding percentage, or the opposing stats, what the other team did while that player was on the floor. You can even see like the pace the team played at when that player was on the floor. But what really gets us going is the search type. So right now we're just looking at single games, but we could look at cumulative games, which is basically just like the full season, every game that matches the search. And we could put up a statistical filter to make sure that we're capturing, the players we want to look at, and that's not going to be some random guy who played 2 minutes this season. So I'll put in 2,000 minutes, and we'll sort by net rebounding. So we'll see whose team had the best rebounding percentage when they were on the floor. Interestingly, Jordan Clarkson, not who I would have guessed. Rudy Gobert probably has something to do with that, and he comes in at number 2. We can also just look at kind of the overall season-long plus minus, which is listed in here as net points. And we can see, all right, Tatum has the best plus minus of any player who played 2,000 minutes this season. And we could also say, well, sure, but he played 2,700 minutes. What about the net rating? What about like kind of adjusting for that? So we can go to per 100 possessions instead of totals, or in the same search, and now it's going to show the team's net rating when that player was on the floor. It turns out it's still Tatum, with Bridges and Paul and Curry and Jaylen Brown. So this is a cool way to look at the players who are, really excelling. If you want to be, a hater, you can change it from descending to ascending, and we can look at who were the worst players this year. Unsurprisingly, it's people who played a lot for teams that weren't very good this year. And so you can do that, but then obviously we're talking about the playoffs. So like what you really want to use this for at this point in the year is trying to figure out how matchups are going to work. So one thing I was thinking about today is the Sixers are playing the Raptors in the first round. And I'm just like curious, like I wonder like what players Doc Rivers should play, what players should he not play. So instead of looking at this raw total, what I'm going to do is go to the player filter and filter the team down to 76ers. And then I'm going to filter the opponent to the Raptors. And then I'll go ahead and run the same search. And what I'm going to get is the season-long plus minus, the season-long net rating for every Sixer when they were facing the Raptors. So I can see how this team might match up. And the best player by this measure is actually Matisse Thybulle, who will not be eligible to play in Toronto. So if you're trying to figure out like how much is the Matisse, situation going to hurt the Sixers, you can see, well, they were fantastic. They were 7.3 points per 100 possessions better with Matisse on the floor when they were facing the Raptors. They're going to be losing that in every game in Toronto. That is a big loss. On the flip side, down here at the bottom, the Sixers have been playing a lot of DeAndre Jordan as Joel Embiid's backup. It seems like that would be a mistake based on what I am seeing here, that they lost those minutes by nearly 50 points per 100 possessions. if I were coaching the Sixers, I would not be playing him based on those numbers. And so you can look at this, and then when you're trying to handicap the game, if you're talking to your friends or if you're watching the game, getting ready beforehand in the group chat, just drop this in. Hey, I think Matisse's absence is going to hurt them more than we think. Look at how good they were when he was on the floor. Or obviously, if you are someone who lives in a state where gambling is legal and you like to wager a little bit on a game, this is the kind of thing you could use to handicap, break it down. If you have, my friend invited me to do this like NBA playoff bracket, which I've never done before. So this is the kind of thing I'm going to be looking at very closely when I fill it out. And then we can reverse that and look at like who, because the Raptors have a lot of dudes. So it's like who's going to play for them. And you can see like how like Birch, it's a rough matchup for him, but it's a great matchup for Boucher and Precious Achiuwa. So this is the plus minus finder. And I could do this all day. We could look at their rebounding, we could look at defensive stats, all of that stuff. But I've got to move it along now to the thing that's like step 2. Like if the plus minus finder, now we know these players, but obviously basketball is not played like one player at a time the way baseball is. It's really about how teammates interact with each other and interact with their opponent. So a better way to look at that even than the plus minus finder is the lineup finder. This is what it sounds like. It uses play-by-play data to look up these same stats that we were looking at earlier. But instead of for an individual player, it's for the full complement of players who are on the floor. And once again, you can see right now that by default, it's showing kind of an individual game look, but we can easily toggle over to get the cumulative game look if we want to look at the full season. So let me see. So what would be a good matchup for this one? I think one interesting thing that I'm looking at is in this Warriors. Oh, sorry, my dog bothered me. I'm going to go back to the Nets and the Celtics because I'm sorry, I'm just really excited for that series. So if I want to see who on earth the Nets are going to play against the Celtics, because they've had so many players rotating in and out of the lineup through the years. Some of these Nets Celtics matchups were with Harden. Some of them were after he was traded. Some of them Kyrie didn't play. So if I kind of want to look at like, how do the actual like lineups that the Nets are going to be playing, how do they do against the Celtics? I would do the same thing I kind of did earlier. So pick the Nets and the Celtics and click get results. And then we can see on here, so this is just the raw plus minus of these lineups against Boston. We could also, and you can see there's a lot of them. There's about 61 different lineups that they've used. So we're sorting by plus minus now, but we could sort by minutes played, and we could see who's playing the most, which kind of works out for us because right up here at the top are 2 lineups that certainly this one we're pretty likely to see: Brown, Curry, Drummond, Durant, and Kyrie. And you can see that one was -4 in about 11 minutes against them. And you can see that this lineup here, maybe -7. So the thing to do, the thing that you can do with this is say like, oh, hey, it seems like the lineup, this one lineup in particular, it looks like it actually is like doing some damage, that somehow like the synergy of these guys is working really well. Or on the flip side, like the synergy of these guys is not working well. And you can get down to like, is this lineup being out rebounded? Is it being, what kind of assists is it generating? What kind of shooting percentage is it generating? What kind of opponent 3-point percentage is it allowing? You can get really in depth on all of that stuff. So then like once we're in the middle of the series, this gets even more interesting. So I'm going to toggle the playoffs, and let's go to Bucks Nets from last year. So you click the playoffs toggle, And after the day after the playoff game, all of the stats from last night's game will be in here. So you can come in and look at how all of these lineups are doing day by day in the series. So if it's game 4 and you've watched the first 3 games and you want to go in there and you're like, oh man, we're getting killed on the boards right now. Who are some of our better rebounding lineups? You can run this search I just ran, and you'll see, all right, this looks like a lineup that's getting a lot of net rebounds. This one, if I did sort of the per 100 possessions one, this one would grade out really well because it's out rebounding the Nets by 9 rebounds in just 18 minutes. So that's a very effective lineup. And then I could go on to the group chat, or I could go on to, social media or whatever. And I could type, hey, I really think that we should see more of the Giannis, Connaughton, Brooke, Middleton, Tucker lineup. That's out rebounding opponents at a crazy rate in the limited minutes it's played. You can, again, toggle from per 48 and per 100. And you also don't have to limit yourself to 5-player lineups. You could look at 4-player combinations, 3-player combinations, or duos, and it'll just show you, regardless of the other 3 players, here are the stats when these two guys are on the floor together. Which certainly in like a playoff series, I can definitely think of a situation where you would be like, well, I'm curious what like Brooke, Lopez, and Giannis, when they're on the floor together, like I don't really care about the other 3 players on the floor, but when they're doing this kind of like bigger lineup, what do those numbers look like? So that would be a good in this situation. You would say, oh, all right, that looks good from a rebounding perspective. So that's what you can do in the lineup finder. And then the last thing I'm going to show really quickly before we get into questions is the shot finder. This shows you every single shot taken in our play-by-play database. So this is built off of every single shot since 1996-97. And because it's play-by-play data, we know a lot about these shots. So we know the exact moment in the game that it was taken, the time and the quarter. We know what the score was when they took the shot. Obviously, we know whether it went in or not. We know what kind of shot it was whether it was a layup or a dunk or a jump shot. We know how far from the rim the shot was. We know whether it was Steph, pulling up from 35 feet, or whether it was, someone dunking right at the basket. We know all of that stuff. So we can put this together to kind of explore some interesting questions. So one thing that I think is pretty common, for people to use in here is, all right, who's clutch? Who's in winning time? Who's the best shooter? So you can look by quarter and get it down to the 4th quarter every time. And you can go to time remaining and get it down to the last 2 minutes. And this is obviously, there's no definition of clutch. So you can decide for yourself where you want to do, but let's do shots to take the lead. You see there's options to tie, to take the lead. You could also type in by hand, like any sort of scoring margin you wanted. So you could do like between the team is losing by 5 to winning by 5 or whatever. But for this, let's just look at shots to take the lead in the last 2 minutes. And of course, we're going to look at the playoffs. And then we're going to go over here to find shots in combined seasons or careers matching criteria. And before we run the search, though, we're going to want to set a couple other parameters. So we'll want to set a minimum on field goal attempts to make sure that we're not getting someone who took like 1 shot. So I'll go 25. I'll start kind of a little on the conservative side and see if I need to make it bigger from there. And then I'll sort by effective field goal percentage. This is Basketball Reference. We're stat nerds. We'll do effective field goal percentage. So I click get results, and it turns out I set the threshold too high. There's only 4 players who matched, but you can see that LeBron has shot almost 50% as far as effective field goal percentage goes in this sort of extremely clutch situation. And like I said, you could make the time, you could do last 5 minutes, last 3 minutes. We could, instead of just shots to take the lead, we could be like, is the game within 5 or whatever, but kind of just within this situation, which obviously people don't take that many shots like these. There aren't really that many shots like these up for grabs in the game, but it's interesting to see LeBron showing up there. So now I dropped it down to 10, and you get a lot more players qualifying. You got Robert Horry there at the top, obviously a legendary playoff performer. Reggie Miller, some really great shooters here, but you can see what I'm doing on here. So another fun one is just who had the most dunks. So I'll just hit remove and get rid of all of these filters. So those should all be gone now. And I'm just going to do field goals. And then I'll go down to shot type in the shot filters, and I will select dunk. And then we'll just see who had the most playoff dunks. And I don't know, that feels like a good note to end on. Surprise, Shaq. Who'd have guessed? Followed by LeBron and Dwight Howard. So there you go. I think that is a really good introduction to how you can use Stathead to get going on all of these playoff stats. So now I'm going to go and see if you have any questions. So while I'm kind of looking through and seeing what questions we have, feel free to drop more of them in the chat or in the Q&A if you have any questions. So let's see. I see there's one here in the Q&A about adding odds to the game data. Generally with stats, with stuff to add, we love to add everything we can. It's a matter of finding a kind of good, reliable source for those sorts of stats. So especially getting back historically, we would need to either find, a database or, someone who's just kind of been collecting these stats and stuff like that. But what we do have on the site is preseason odds. So you can see, and these are pretty historically robust. This is on Basketball Reference, not Stathead. So this is, you don't even need a subscription to access this. But if you go to the start of the season and you go down to other, you can click preseason odds, and you can see the win-loss over-under total for the team and their odds of winning the title. Hope you bet the under on the Lakers this year because they did not end up winning 53 games. And you can see this going pretty far back. So you could put together some kind of interesting research on, how often is this accurate, how often certain teams, beat their over-under, all sorts of stuff like that. So we'd love to add the rest of the gambling stuff, but it's a matter of finding the things. And then as far as, I see we've got another question about, these kind of newer advanced stats like Raptor, and if we have plans to add them. It's something that we, are looking at. I don't know the details of Raptor specifically. A lot of the very, very new cutting edge stats use proprietary data or a proprietary formula. So we would have to kind of talk to the creators of it a little bit more. One thing that we really like is that the advanced stats we do have, win shares, PER, box plus minus, FORP, all of those have very detailed explanations in the glossary section of our website. So if you are curious, you can actually go and see how box plus minus is calculated and decide for yourself. I mean, I know it's a hot topic right now with people debating the MVP and whether advanced stats should be a part of that discussion. And, instead of, I don't know, just kind of going by gut, you can actually go and read point by point, like how that stat was made and be like, all right, I think box plus minus is legit, or like, I've read this explanation and I think that that's kind of a silly stat, and it's totally up to you, So we would love to certainly add more stats like that, but it's kind of an ongoing process. And then we got a great question in the chat. How can I best silence my goofy uncle and prove that LeBron is greater than Jordan? We have a great tool for that. It's called the Player Comparison Finder. And I think LeBron and Jordan is the default. So you can go in here and you can type in the names of any set of players. You can go up to 6, and then their stats will be side by side. So you can easily kind of look at them right side by side and get the picture in your head of like, here's what this player does. Here's this player's strengths. Here are their weaknesses. Here's what LeBron, LeBron clearly, more rebounds than Jordan, more assists. Jordan, obviously more scoring. So you can kind of use this as the basis to build your case, that you think LeBron is the better player, or if you think Jordan's the better player, or if you think it's Wilt Chamberlain, you can toss Wilt into this and get his stats with both of them and be like, hey, Wilt averaged like 5,000 points a game. It's probably him. Let's see. It seems like we don't have any more questions, but I'll just give a minute just to throw it out there in case anyone else has any last questions or anything. If not, then I just want to say thanks again for joining us tonight. Great question from Bowen about the buzzer beater table. On Basketball Reference, if you haven't seen it, we have a table that our researchers made of every single buzzer beater that's ever been made in NBA history. Currently, we don't have the feature that you're talking about, though, which is sorting it by season type or by playoff round or stuff like that. All of that would be really cool. And I suspect that that's stuff that we're working on as we kind of go around and work on these improvements, like what we did to the Season Finder to the other tools. I would suspect that we'd take a look at something like that for the Shot Finder. If not, you can get some of that in the Shot Finder by sorting by playoffs and kind of time remaining on the clock. You can get pretty close in there, but obviously it won't have the buzzer beaters from the pre play-by-play era, which this list does. So definitely that's a really cool idea, and I think something we'll be taking a look at. Great point from Katie, who reminded me that the other thing is that if you want to do more stuff with this table or with any table on our website, more in-depth research, you can export the table off of Basketball Reference and do it yourself. The way to do it is very easy. You just hover over the share and export button and you click get table as CSV, and it'll download a CSV it'll download a CSV of this table that you can then manipulate in R or manipulate in Excel, whatever sort of like program you use to do your like advanced level research, you can do all that on here. So I think with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But I just want to say again, thank you all so much for coming today. We recorded this, so we'll be sending the video around. So if you want to go back and remind yourself of everything, if there's something I mentioned that you forgot, you can go back and review it. But otherwise, we're really excited to share this stats with you, share these tools with you, and to really help you really enjoy the playoffs and really just have a great time watching basketball. That's what these tools are there for, and that's what we hope you use them for. So thanks. And if you have any questions for us, you can feel free to reach out. We have social media accounts. So let me go over to that slide. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so you can hit us up on Twitter. We have @Stathead and @BBallRef. If either one will be able to help you. We're on Instagram too. And we're on Facebook. So feel free to hit us up on any of those things, or just email us support@stathead.com. If you have any questions, we love help showing you if stuff is possible, how you can do searches, or if not, it could spur a great idea that could lead us to create a new tool. So that'll do it for this webinar. But thank you all so much, and enjoy the first weekend of the playoffs. Is my favorite of the year. 8 games over 2 days. It's amazing. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next time we do one of these.